Well, welcome to Advent, my friends. I'm going to mention the gospel a time or two in this sermon, but really the main thrust of my message will revolve around what my dad, Jeff, read in the book of James. I don't often get the book of James very often in the lectionary, so I thought, let's talk a little bit about the book of James. So yes, welcome to Advent, a new church season, the first church season of the year. And Advent is sometimes known as a season of waiting and looking forward to what's coming, mostly for Christmas around the corner. So with such seasonal themes of waiting and looking forward, today, we appropriately receive a text from the book of James encouraging patience. On the note of patience, I can't help but think of the cultural maxim that patience is a virtue. And that's not just a cultural maxim, but biblical too. In Galatians chapter 5, Paul tells us indeed that patience is a virtue. And the little kid in me, every time I hear patience is a virtue, the little kid in me wants to know why. I remember being told all the time as a little kid, patience is a virtue, which first of all means I was not a patient kid, that I would hear it more than once as a kid. But I always thought, why? What does that even mean? Why is patience considered a virtue? And also, what is a virtue? Well, for this, folks, it's only 10:50 something, or no, it's 11 after 11. Boy, I really think differently about how time moves in worship than you'd probably do. At 11 in the morning, we're going to do some philosophy, okay? In terms of what is a virtue and all that stuff, okay? According to ethicist Stanley J. Grenz, a virtue is a character trait that is deemed morally praiseworthy. So, when we say that patience is a virtue, we are saying that it is morally good. Now the little kid in me wants to know, what makes something morally good? Well, the good news is we get an answer from Jesus today in answering the question of what is and isn't morally good. We have a standard from Jesus to determine what is and is not morally good, and it's in our gospel today, where Jesus lists two of the most important commandments. And he says, upon which all the law and all the prophets hang. In other words, he's saying, when you mention all the law and all the prophets, Jesus is saying, these are the two most important things in my Bible. These are the two most important things in my entire movement and in this entire religion. Love the Lord your God, and love your neighbor as yourself. So for Jesus, for something to be morally good, it must accomplish love of God and or love of neighbor. So, patience is a virtue. Virtue is something that's morally good. Morally good is love of God and love of neighbor. You tracking with me so far? This all means that for patience to be a virtue, love of God and love of neighbor has to happen within our patience. And for this, we finally turn to the book of James. In the reading, James paints a vivid picture of what faithful patience looks like. For the image of patience, James gives us the farmer. He writes, "Be patient until the coming of the Lord. The farmer waits for the precious crop from the earth. You also must be patient." Let's really think deeply about James using the farmer as the picture of patience. Because if we know one thing about farmers, and I can affirm this from being a pastor in a farming community prior to FLC for 7 years, that farmers do not like sitting around and doing nothing. They're often doing, and they're always preparing for the next cycle of their season. So in other words, my friends, a farmer's version of patience, and therefore James's version of patience, is active. Activity within the patience. I mean, think about it. The way a farmer waits for the harvest is constant preparation. The farmer doesn't just sit on a log and look at their fields. Getting ready for growth and harvest involves active planning, careful calculation, managing of the books, maintaining equipment, testing soil, amending soil, composting, coordinating with the elevator, picking rock, eyes on global markets, eyes on local markets, eyes on invasive species, eyes on weather cycles, eyes on propane prices, eyes on technology and machine development, eyes on X, eyes on Y, eyes on Z. The way a farmer waits is to tend, to prepare. The farmer's patience is cultivation to eventually provide for others. And therein lies the virtue of Christian patience. So, to be faithfully patient for Christmas, and that's our Advent theme, our waiting is not to be idle or inactive. Like the farmer prepares as they wait, we are to prepare our hearts in worship, just like you are doing today, in community and in prayer as we wait for the Lord. Like the farmer nurtures their fields as they wait, we are to nurture one another and to nurture the bonds of community and relationships as we wait for the Lord. Virtuous patience as we wait is active in love of God and compassion for the other. According to Jesus and James, as we wait for God's promises to be celebrated and fulfilled at Christmas time, we are called to loving activity in the meantime. And this is all really hard. The life of a farmer is hard. Love is hard. Patience is really hard. Many of you are probably impatiently waiting for this sermon to finally end. What might help and encourage us in our efforts to be patient? We go back to the children's sermon. What might help and encourage us in our efforts to be patient is to remember as often as we can and to remind each other as often as we can the patience we first and always will receive from God. Remember that God is no idle observer either, but constantly preparing, constantly nurturing, and constantly seeking all of us with love through word, through sacrament, and through community. Remember that we have a patient God who the Bible tells us is slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love. So friends, as we wait for Christmas, our patience is to be active in love, preparing our hearts with worship and devotion, and nurturing the bonds of humanity with compassion and, as Blakely said, kindness. For that patience is finally a virtue. Amen.